Big news for Oregon football. You have your new head coach is Dan Lanning. If you don't know who Dan Lanning is, he just happens to be the defensive coordinator for the best defense in the nation. He's Georgia's defensive coordinator, and obviously his star has risen this year on the backs of a tremendous defense from Georgia that has shut down almost all of its opponents. Not exactly Alabama, didn't have the best showing in the SEC championship game, but regardless, Dan Lanning, relatively young guy, pretty high energy dude, and a fairly good recruiter so far. He helped bring on board a bunch of decent players like Nakobe Dean, Nolan Smith, guys who are future NFL players. And he's been with Georgia since 2018. He was promoted to defensive coordinator role in 2019, I believe. So I think that means he has 3 years of full-time defensive coordinator experience. Now going to Oregon to be the head coach, replacing Mario Cristobal, who took the job in Miami. That could actually be viewed as a step up in some extent. In some sense, I think it could be an improvement for Oregon if you bring in someone as defensive-minded as Dan Lanning, someone who's young and probably going to struggle in his first year or two, but eventually figure things out. In a conference like the Pac-12, I really think there's a good chance for him to grow as a coach and have a very successful time with Oregon, especially what he's going to do on the defensive side of the ball for your program. Just having a guy like that around after what he did at Georgia and helped build Georgia, I think it's going to be big for Oregon to maybe bring in some guys. I don't think it's going to be as much of a splash signing as almost as most of these offseason additions have been at this point. You know, it's just not going to be the kind of thing that's going to drive recruiting as much as like Lincoln Riley going to USC. It's probably not going to be on that level for obvious reasons, but I still think it's going to be a long-term impact in your program. That could be a plus. I have trouble believing a Dan Lanning-led defense or team would lose to Utah twice in the span of 2 to 3 weeks. So I think Dan Lanning is going to help your team quite a bit. It's just a question of, can he maintain some of the stability that Cristobal had originally built there, and can he build upon that? And I believe there's a good chance he turns into a very successful coach at Oregon. Let's talk a little bit about the college football playoffs, because one of the questions I know a lot of fans have is, will Dan Lanning still coach for Georgia throughout the playoffs? Because we've seen guys like Brian Kelly is leaving Notre Dame ahead of the bowl game they're going to eventually play to go coach at LSU. He was obviously already introduced at LSU for a basketball game. He was introduced late at halftime, and Notre Dame's already hired a new head coach from within. A bunch of these are programs as well. Their head coaches are leaving before the bowl games and going somewhere else. That will not be the case in this situation with Dan Lanning. There's already been a statement put out there from Kirby Smart saying that Dan Lanning's going to stick with the team throughout the college football playoffs, which I think is the right move for a lot of reasons. I mean, you don't want to lose your defensive coordinator ahead of the most important game of your entire season. And it wouldn't make a lot of sense for Dan Lanning either. Dan Lanning wants to be with that program throughout the playoffs. And it makes sense, because if you win, you get to even boost your recruiting stats even a little bit more by saying you were the defensive coordinator of a college football champion. And of course, he has relationships in that building with a lot of teams, a lot of the team personnel, in terms of the players, also the coaching staff, maybe the trainers, stuff like that. So it's very nice to see that he's going to stick around. And I obviously would have expected him to, but you never know with these situations. Sometimes it's an immediate thing. I know a lot of schools, they want to do this immediately, but I'm kind of glad that's how this works out. Because now we get to see Georgia still play at a high level with their full coaching staff against Alabama, potentially again, but against Michigan in the semifinals, which is nice because I really, really think that's going to be a tremendous matchup, one of the best matchups of this entire season. And just reading off the short statement Kirby Smart made, he said, when he meaning Dan Lanning, will coach with us for the upcoming college football playoff, we will move forward with Glenn Schumann and Will Muschamp as co-defensive coordinators. Dan and I are both looking forward to preparing for the college football playoff. So it looks like, while he's still going to be with the team, they're looking at moving forward and playing long-term. And Will Muschamp, obviously a former coach himself, now taking on a co-defensive coordinator role with Glenn Schumann. So, big impact for Georgia, big impact for Oregon, and overall, it's just another interesting night for college football. Despite we didn't have any games today, which is still really disappointing for me, honestly. I do miss having college football. It's almost as exciting, if not more exciting for me at the NFL than the NFL is at this point, because so much craziness happens on a weekend of college football. And there are so many games and so many unique games. But overall, just a short little addition to the news cycle tonight, and a very important one if you're any member of the Pac-12, really. So yeah, that's it. Thank you guys for watching, and hopefully, I'll be back with some more content tomorrow.